I was covered in amniotic fluid and exhaustion when the delivery truck pulled up to my apartment building. Just another Tuesday in Kansas City for this midwife. The driver handed me a package that felt way too light to be the medical supplies I'd ordered. "You, Chelsea Garcia?" "That's me." I signed for it without looking, my mind still replaying Sarah Martinez's difficult labor from the night before. 13 hours. 13 damn hours of coaching her through contractions while her husband paced holes in the hospital floor. Back in my apartment, I tore open the package expecting sterile gauze and antiseptic. Instead, vibrant paint samples scattered across my kitchen table like confetti. Turquoise, magenta, golden yellow, colors so brilliant they made my tired eyes water. A handwritten note fluttered to the floor. "For your upcoming color therapy certification workshop. These healing crystals will help center your practice. Best wishes, Dr. Amanda Sterling." "What the hell?" I muttered, holding up an amethyst that caught the afternoon light. My phone buzzed. Another delivery. Mrs. Chen was in early labor across town, but those paint samples nagged at me like an itch I couldn't scratch. Someone named Evelyn Stewart was probably expecting this package. I called the delivery company. They gave me an address on the plaza, 15 minutes from the hospital. Perfect timing. The studio sat between a coffee shop and vintage bookstore, its windows painted with swirling rainbows that seemed to dance in the autumn breeze. A simple sign read Stewart Color Therapy, healing through light and hue. I pushed through the door and stepped into another world. The space glowed with warm amber lighting, walls painted in gradual color transitions that somehow made my shoulders relax instantly. Prisms hung from the ceiling, casting tiny rainbows that shifted with each breath of air. "Can I help you?" The voice belonged to a woman arranging crystals on a circular table. She turned, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Brunette hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, framing a heart-shaped face with the kindest brown eyes I'd ever seen. She wore a flowing purple dress that made her look like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale. "I think this is yours." I held up the package, suddenly aware of how disheveled I must look in my wrinkled scrubs. Her face lit up with relief. "Oh, thank goodness. I thought it was lost forever." She took the package, her fingers brushing mine for just a second. "I'm Evelyn Stewart. Chelsea Garcia, midwife." I gestured toward my scrubs. "Sorry about the, professional aromatics." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Birth is sacred work, nothing to apologize for." "So, you really heal people with colors?" "Color affects our emotions more than most people realize." She opened the package, examining each paint sample with the careful attention I usually reserved for monitoring fetal heartbeats. Blue calms anxiety, red energizes, green promotes healing. Your body responds to light frequencies whether you're conscious of it or not. Sounds like pseudoscience to me. Most medical professionals think that initially. She picked up a deep emerald sample, holding it toward me. "But you deliver babies. You've seen miracles that science can't fully explain." She had a point. I'd witnessed enough unexplainable moments in delivery rooms to know the universe held mysteries beyond textbooks. "What would you prescribe for chronic exhaustion?" I asked, half joking. "Orange for vitality, yellow for mental clarity." She studied my face with professional intensity. "But you need deeper healing. Blue for peace. Maybe some violet for spiritual balance." "Spiritual balance?" I snorted. "Lady, I haven't had a spiritual moment since my last confession 10 years ago. Everyone has inner light, Chelsea. Sometimes it just gets buried under stress and responsibility." The way she said my name made something flutter in my stomach. Probably hunger. I hadn't eaten since grabbing a granola bar at 6 that morning. "I should go. Mrs. Chen won't deliver herself." "Of course." Evelyn walked me to the door. "Thank you for bringing this by. You saved my workshop." Outside on the sidewalk, I found myself lingering. Through the window, I watched her arrange those paint samples with the same reverence I used when placing a newborn in its mother's arms. My phone buzzed again. Mrs. Chen's contractions were 3 minutes apart. But as I drove toward the hospital, I couldn't stop thinking about those warm brown eyes and the way the studio had made my perpetual tension dissolve. even for just a few minutes. Maybe there was something to this color therapy thing after all. Mrs. Chen's delivery went smoothly, but I couldn't shake thoughts of Evelyn's studio. 3 days later, I found myself standing outside those rainbow windows again, clutching a ridiculous excuse about needing stress management for work. The door chimed as I entered. Evelyn looked up from organizing colored scarves, her face breaking into that wind chime smile. "Chelsea, what brings you back?" "I've been thinking about what you said, about stress and colors." I shifted my weight, feeling foolish. Maybe I could try a session. "Of course." She gestured toward a comfortable chair surrounded by soft lighting. "Sit anywhere that feels right." I chose a spot near the window, where afternoon light filtered through hanging crystals. Evelyn pulled up a chair across from me, close enough that I caught her scent, something like lavender and sunshine. "Tell me about your stress levels lately." "On a scale of 1 to 10? About 15. I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Yesterday I delivered 3 babies in 12 hours. 2 emergencies, 1 breech presentation. I barely had time to change scrubs between deliveries." "Your job requires incredible emotional strength." "Some days I feel like I'm drowning." The words surprised me. I never admitted weakness to anyone. Every birth is someone's miracle, but the pressure never stops. What if something goes wrong? What if I miss something critical? Evelyn reached for a selection of colored cards, fanning them like a deck. "Choose 3 colors that speak to you right now." Without thinking, I picked deep blue, soft green, and warm orange. "Interesting choices." She studied the cards. "Blue for the peace you're seeking. Green for healing, both for others and yourself. Orange for the vitality you're missing." "You get all that from colored paper?" "I get that from watching how you respond." She set the cards aside and pulled out what looked like a small flashlight with colored filters. "Color therapy works through light frequencies affecting your nervous system." "May I?" I nodded. She switched on the device, casting a gentle blue glow across my face and hands. The light felt warm, soothing in a way I couldn't explain. "Close your eyes and focus on your breathing." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I found myself relaxing for the first time in weeks, my shoulders dropping from their permanent position near my ears. "Better?" "Actually, yeah." I opened my eyes to find her watching me with professional interest that felt like something more. "How is that possible?" "Light affects your pineal gland, which regulates mood and sleep cycles." She switched the filter to soft green. "But there's also something to be said for giving yourself permission to just be still." I don't remember the last time I sat still for 10 minutes. When did you last do something just for yourself? The question caught me off guard. I became a midwife to help people. That's what I do. But who takes care of Chelsea? No one had asked me that in years. Maybe ever. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Evelyn reached out, her fingertips barely grazing my wrist. "You can't pour from an empty cup." The contact sent electricity up my arm. Not the clinical touch I was used to in medical settings, but something warmer, more personal. Our eyes met and held for a moment that stretched longer than it should have. I pulled my hand back, suddenly aware of crossing some invisible line. "I should probably book regular appointments," I said quickly. "For the stress management." "I'd like that." Her cheeks flushed pink. "Tuesday and Thursday evenings work well for most healthcare workers." "Tuesdays are good." My phone buzzed with another delivery alert. Damn, I have to go. She walked me to the door again, and I found myself wishing the studio was bigger so the walk would take longer. "Chelsea?" She touched my shoulder as I reached for the handle. "What you do matters. Those families will remember you forever." "Thanks." I turned back, surprised by how much her words meant coming from someone who barely knew me. "See you Tuesday?" "I'll be here." Outside, autumn air bit at my cheeks as I headed toward my car. Through the window, I watched Evelyn rearrange those colored scarves with the same gentle attention she'd given me. My phone kept buzzing with work alerts, but for once, I didn't feel the familiar spike of anxiety. Whatever she'd done with those lights had worked better than the sleeping pills gathering dust in my medicine cabinet. As I drove toward another delivery, I caught myself looking forward to Tuesday in a way that had nothing to do with stress management and everything to do with those warm brown eyes and the way she said my name like it mattered. Professional boundaries, Chelsea. Remember professional boundaries. But even as I repeated the reminder, I knew I was already in trouble. Tuesday sessions became my lifeline. For 2 weeks, I'd sink into that chair surrounded by Evelyn's gentle light therapy, feeling my constant tension melt away. We talked about everything except the obvious chemistry crackling between us every time our hands accidentally touched. But October brought the kind of night that breaks even seasoned midwives. Maria Gonzalez was only 17, alone and terrified. Her baby's heart rate kept dropping during contractions. Standard protocol called for emergency C-section, but Maria begged me to try natural delivery first. "Please," she whispered, gripping my hand. "I don't want surgery." 6 hours later, I lost them both. The silence in that delivery room felt like drowning. Maria's mother collapsed in the hallway. The father never showed up. I stood there covered in blood and failure, staring at two people who should have gone home together. By 3 a.m., I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, shaking too hard to drive. Everyone else had gone home. The other nurses offered comfort, but I couldn't bear their sympathy. Without thinking, I dialed Evelyn's number. "Chelsea? What's wrong?" Her voice, sleepy and concerned, nearly broke me. "I'm sorry. I know it's late. Where are you?" "Hospital parking lot. I lost someone tonight. 2 someones. I'm coming." "You don't have to. Give me 15 minutes. She arrived in pajama pants and an oversized sweater, carrying a thermos and that warm presence that always made breathing easier. She slid into my passenger seat without a word, unscrewing the thermos cap. Chamomile tea with honey. The simple kindness undid me completely. Years of holding it together for other people's tragedies, and suddenly I was sobbing into my hands like a child. Evelyn didn't try to fix it, or offer empty platitudes about God's plan. She just sat there, occasionally rubbing my back while I fell apart. Her name was Maria, I finally managed. 17 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. "Tell me about her." So I did. About Maria's dreams, her fear, her mother's prayers in rapid Spanish, about how hard I'd fought to save them both, and how it hadn't been enough. "You carry everyone's pain," Evelyn said softly. "But you can't save the whole world, Chelsea." "Then what's the point? Why do this job if I can't protect them?" "Because for every Maria, there are 10 families who go home safe because of you. You've told me about them too." She was right. The Johnsons with their twin boys. Mrs. Patterson's daughter born on her late husband's birthday. Dozens of successful deliveries I'd celebrated quietly and then forgotten in the rush to the next case. I don't know how to stop caring so much. Don't stop. Just learn to care for yourself too. Dawn was breaking across Kansas City, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. The hospital shift change began, new nurses arriving for the day rotation. "I should go home," I said, but made no move to start the car. "Come to the studio instead. We'll do a healing session. I'm not exactly in the mood for color therapy. Trust me." The studio felt different in early morning light. Evelyn lit candles and draped soft blue scarves over the lamps, creating an atmosphere of peace that seemed impossible after the night I'd had. "Lie down," she said, gesturing to a cushioned mat she'd arranged on the floor. For the first time since meeting her, I didn't argue or make jokes about alternative medicine. I just followed instructions, too emotionally exhausted to maintain any defenses. She worked quietly, using different colored lights to help release the trauma lodged in my body. Green for healing, blue for peace, soft yellow for hope. Her hands never quite touched me, but I felt her presence like warmth from a fireplace. "Better?" she asked after 20 minutes. "Yeah. Actually, yeah." I sat up slowly, surprised to find the crushing weight in my chest had lifted slightly. Grief needs somewhere to go. If you hold it all inside, it poisons everything else. She was sitting cross-legged beside me, close enough that I could see gold flecks in her brown eyes. The morning light caught in her hair, and suddenly all I could think about was how beautiful she looked, and how much I needed something good after all that darkness. Evelyn? Yeah? Thank you. For coming. For this. For everything. She smiled that wind chime smile, but something had shifted in her expression. Less professional distance, more genuine affection. You don't have to thank me for caring about you. The words hung between us, loaded with meaning neither of us was quite ready to acknowledge. I found myself leaning closer, drawn by warmth and comfort, and the way she was looking at me like I mattered. Chelsea. Her voice was barely a whisper. Our faces were inches apart now, her breath sweet with chamomile tea. Every rational thought screamed about professional boundaries and complications, but Maria's death had reminded me how quickly everything could disappear. I kissed her. Soft and tentative at first, just lips barely touching. But when she didn't pull away, when her hand came up to cup my cheek, everything else fell silent except the sound of our breathing and the distant hum of morning traffic. When we finally separated, the sunrise had painted the studio walls gold and amber. We probably shouldn't have done that, I whispered. Probably not, she agreed, but her thumb was still tracing my cheekbone. I'm a mess, Evelyn. My job, my life, everything. We're all messes. Some of us just hide it better. She was right, but it didn't make the situation less complicated. Still, sitting there in the golden morning light with the taste of her on my lips, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Some risks were worth taking. The next 3 weeks felt like living in a beautiful secret. We didn't talk about that morning kiss or what it meant. Instead, we fell into something that looked like friendship but felt like dancing around a flame. Evelyn would text me between deliveries, asking if I'd eaten or reminding me to breathe during stressful moments. I'd stop by the studio with coffee, claiming I was in the neighborhood even when I'd driven 20 minutes out of my way. You know, she said one evening as I helped her organize paint samples, most of my clients don't volunteer for inventory duty. Most of your clients probably have lives outside work. And you don't? I considered this. My apartment, my roommate Marcus with his gaming addiction and unwashed dishes, the medical journals I read before bed, the takeout containers accumulating in my fridge. Not really, no. She looked up from the color wheel she was arranging. When did you last do something fun? This is fun. Cataloging paint samples is your idea of entertainment? Being here is my idea of entertainment. The honesty slipped out before I could stop it. Something shifted in her expression. We'd been careful to maintain safe distance since that morning, but suddenly the air felt charged again. Chelsea. I know. Professional boundaries, client relationships, all that. You're not really my client anymore. What am I then? She set down the color wheel, turning to face me fully. I don't know. What do you want to be? The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I was brave enough to cross. But then she took a step closer, and I remembered how her lips had tasted like chamomile and possibility. I want to be whatever means I can keep seeing you. This time, she kissed me first. Different from that grief-stricken morning kiss. This was intentional, hungry, full of 3 weeks of unspoken want. Her hands tangled in my hair, and I pressed her back against the display of sunset-colored scarves. Your apartment or mine? She whispered against my mouth. Yours. Marcus is home, and he asks too many questions. We barely made it up the narrow stairs to her loft above the studio. She fumbled with keys while I kissed her neck, tasting salt and that lavender scent that had been driving me crazy for weeks. Her apartment was an extension of the studio below. Soft lighting, flowing fabrics, plants everywhere. But I barely registered the decor because she was pulling me toward her bedroom, and suddenly we were falling onto her bed in a tangle of urgent hands and breathless laughter. Are you sure about this? She asked, hovering above me with her hair falling like a curtain around our faces. I haven't been sure about anything in months, but this feels right. She smiled and kissed me again, slower this time, like we had all night to explore each other. Her hands traced patterns on my skin that felt like worship, and when she whispered my name into the darkness, it sounded like a prayer. Afterward, we lay wrapped in sheets that smelled like her, my head on her chest, listening to her heartbeat slow back to normal. Moonlight filtered through gauze curtains, painting everything silver and blue. "So, what happens now?" I asked. "Now we figure it out as we go. I'm not good at dating. My schedule is insane, I'm emotionally unavailable half the time, and I have commitment issues dating back to Catholic school." She laughed, the sound vibrating through her chest. "Well, when you put it like that, how could I resist? I'm serious. You should know what you're getting into."
Chelsea.
She tilted my chin up so I had to meet her eyes. "I've watched you care for people with incredible tenderness. I've seen you cry over losing someone you barely knew. You think that makes you emotionally unavailable? It makes me complicated. Good. Simple is boring." I wanted to argue, to list all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Instead, I kissed her collarbone and let myself believe that maybe, for once, something could work out. The next morning, I woke up alone in her bed, with sunlight streaming through those gauze curtains. Panic set in immediately. Had she regretted it? Changed her mind? Decided I was too much trouble? Then I smelled coffee and heard humming from the kitchen. I found her making breakfast in an oversized t-shirt and nothing else, her hair messy from sleep and my fingers. She looked up when I appeared in the doorway, and her smile could have powered the whole city. "Morning, beautiful." "Morning." I felt suddenly shy, uncertain of the etiquette for morning-after conversations with women who weren't one-night stands. "Coffee?" I made French toast. "You cook?" "I have many hidden talents." She winked, and I felt that flutter in my stomach again. We ate breakfast sitting on her tiny balcony overlooking the plaza, her bare legs tangled with mine under a small table painted turquoise. Other people were heading to work, caught up in Monday morning routines, while we existed in this perfect bubble of stolen time. "I have to go," I said eventually, though every cell in my body wanted to stay. "I know. Baby delivery waits for no one." She walked me to the door, and I found myself hesitating, unsure how to leave. What were the rules here? A kiss goodbye? A casual wave? She solved the problem by pulling me close and kissing me thoroughly, leaving no doubt that last night hadn't been a mistake. "Go save some lives," she whispered against my lips. "Call me later?" Try to stop me. I practically floated to my car, grinning like an idiot. For the first time in months, I felt like I had something to look forward to beyond the next delivery. This thing with Evelyn might be complicated, but damn if it wasn't the best complication I'd ever stumbled into. 2 blissful weeks passed in a haze of stolen moments and secret smiles. Evelyn and I had found our rhythm. Late dinners at her place after my shifts, lazy Sunday mornings in bed, quiet conversations that stretched until dawn. I'd never felt so connected to another person, which made walking into my apartment that Tuesday evening feel like stepping into a nightmare. Marcus was sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by empty beer bottles and what looked like pawn shop receipts. His gaming setup, usually dominating the living room, had been reduced to a single monitor and outdated keyboard. "Hey Chelsea, how was work?" Something in his tone made my stomach clench. Too casual, too forced. "Fine. What's with all the paperwork?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Listen, I need to tell you something, and you're gonna be pissed." "Marcus?" My voice dropped to that deadly calm I used with panicking fathers in delivery rooms. "What did you do?" "I had some debts, gambling stuff. Nothing major, but the guys were getting impatient about payment." The room tilted slightly. "How much?" 15 grand. $15,000? The number came out as a screech. "How the hell do you accumulate 15,000 in gambling debt?" It started small. Just some online poker, a few sports bets. But then I got behind, and the interest kept building, and I sank into a chair before my legs gave out. "Please tell me you didn't touch my medical school loan money." His silence was answer enough. "Marcus, that account is for my student loans. If I default on those payments, I lose my license." I know. But I had a plan to pay it back before you noticed. What plan? But even as I asked, dread was already pooling in my stomach. He gestured toward the pawn shop receipts. I sold some stuff. Your grandmother's medical bag collection, that vintage stethoscope set, the antique surgical instruments. The words hit me like physical blows. Those instruments had belonged to 4 generations of women in my family. My great-grandmother, the first licensed female doctor in our county. My grandmother, who delivered half the babies in rural Kansas before there were proper hospitals. My mother, who'd used them before switching to modern equipment. They were irreplaceable. Priceless. The only connection I had left to the women who'd shaped my calling. You sold my grandmother's medical collection. I got good money for them. Antique medical stuff is worth more than you'd think. I stood up so fast the chair toppled backward. Those weren't antiques, you bastard. They were family heirlooms. They were my history. Chelsea, calm down. I'll buy them back once I get ahead again. With what money? You just told me you're $15,000 in debt and stole my loan payments. It's not stealing if we're roommates. We're roommates, not married. That was my money in my account for my loans. I grabbed my keys, needing to get out before I did something we'd both regret. How long do I have before the next student loan payment bounces? 2 weeks, maybe 3. 2 weeks to come up with money I didn't have to pay for debts I hadn't incurred. 2 weeks to figure out how to explain to Evelyn that my life was imploding. Evelyn. The thought of her stopped me cold. How could I drag her into this mess? She was peace and light and healing colors, and I was about to become a financial disaster with a credit rating in free fall. I trusted you, I said quietly. For 3 years I trusted you with everything. My home, my finances, my peace of mind. You can trust me to fix this. No, I can't. I can't trust anyone anymore. I grabbed my overnight bag and stuffed it with essentials, moving through our apartment like a tornado. Marcus followed me around, making promises he couldn't keep, and apologies that meant nothing. Where are you going? Somewhere you can't destroy my life any further. But even as I drove toward Evelyn's studio, doubt gnawed at me. How well did I really know her? We'd been together 2 weeks. What if she was just as capable of betrayal? What if letting someone close again was just setting myself up for more devastation? I found her in the studio, cleaning up after her evening session with an elderly client. She looked up when I entered, and her smile died when she saw my face. What happened? The whole story poured out. Marcus's gambling, the stolen money, my grandmother's medical instruments sold to strangers for quick cash, the student loans that would default, potentially ending my career. I'm so sorry, she said when I finished. How can I help? You can't. This is my problem. Chelsea, we're together now. Your problems are my problems. The words that should have been comforting felt suffocating instead. Are we? Really? We've known each other 2 months. We've been sleeping together for 2 weeks. That doesn't make us a couple. She flinched like I'd slapped her. It doesn't? I don't know. I thought I knew Marcus after 3 years of living together. Turns out people can lie about everything that matters. I'm not Marcus. How do I know that? How do I know you won't decide I'm too much trouble and disappear? How do I know you're not just experimenting with dating women and you'll go back to men when things get complicated? Each question was a knife thrown in panic, designed to hurt before I could be hurt first. The look on her face told me I was succeeding. Is that really what you think of me? I don't know what to think anymore. Yesterday I thought I had a stable living situation and financial security. Today I find out I've been an idiot for years. So you're taking that out on me? I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. She stood up slowly, her movements careful and controlled. You know what? You're right. We barely know each other. Maybe it's better if we figure that out before this goes any further. The words I'd been hoping to hear felt like poison in my veins. Fine. Fine. I walked toward the door, every step feeling like betrayal. But I couldn't stop. Couldn't risk having someone else I cared about prove that trust was just another word for stupidity. Chelsea. I paused with my hand on the door handle. For what it's worth, I would never hurt you the way he did. I didn't turn around. Couldn't bear to see the pain in those warm brown eyes that had become my safe harbor. You already have. Outside, Kansas City stretched cold and unforgiving under October stars. I sat in my car, shaking with adrenaline and regret, wondering how I'd managed to destroy the best thing in my life in under an hour. But it was better this way. Safer. At least that's what I kept telling myself as I drove toward the cheapest motel I could find. Living in the Sunset Motel wasn't exactly the fresh start I'd imagined. The walls were thin, the carpet questionable, and the neon sign buzzed all night like an angry bee. But it was all I could afford while trying to figure out how to pay Marcus's debts before my student loans defaulted. 3 days of hospital shifts and financial panic had me running on pure caffeine and stubbornness. I'd avoided the plaza entirely, taking the long route to work to stay away from rainbow-painted windows and memories of warm brown eyes. My phone had 17 missed calls from Evelyn. I'd deleted the voicemails without listening. "You look like hell," Sarah commented during our Thursday shift, watching me fumble with IV equipment I could normally handle in my sleep. "Thanks. Really needed that confidence boost." "When did you last eat something that wasn't from a vending machine?" I considered this. The granola bar for breakfast. Stale chips around noon. Define eat. Sarah grabbed my arm and steered me toward the break room. "Sit. I'm buying you real food from the cafeteria." "I'm fine." "You're falling apart. And before you argue, Mrs. Patterson specifically asked for you to deliver her second baby next month. You think she wants a midwife who can't focus on basic tasks?" She had a point. I slumped into a plastic chair while Sarah returned with a sandwich and coffee that actually smelled edible. "So what's the crisis? Money? Family? That roommate you've complained about?" "All of the above." Between bites, I gave her the condensed version. Marcus's betrayal, the stolen money, the impossible debt. "And the woman you've been seeing? Evelyn, right?" I nearly choked on my coffee. "How did you—" "Chelsea, you've been floating around here for weeks like someone gave you happy pills. Then suddenly you're back to stress eating and working double shifts. Doesn't take a detective. There's no woman anymore." Because? Because I can't trust anyone. Because people lie. Because getting close to someone just gives them more ways to hurt you. Sarah studied me with the same expression she used on difficult patients. "Did she steal your money?" "No." "Did she lie to you about something important?" "Not exactly." "Then what did she do?" "She cared about me, and I panicked." "Ah," Sarah nodded like this explained everything. Classic Chelsea Garcia self-sabotage, right on schedule. "Excuse me?" "You've been doing this since nursing school. Get close to someone. Find a reason to run before they can hurt you first. Remember David? You broke up with him because he wanted to meet your family. And Maria from pediatrics? You ghosted her after she said she was falling for you." The accuracy stung. "This is different." "How?" "Because this time I'm right. Everyone leaves eventually." "Or," Sarah said gently, "everyone leaves because you push them away before they get the chance to stay." My phone buzzed with another call from Evelyn. I declined it automatically. Take some advice from someone who's been married 15 years. Love isn't about finding someone who'll never hurt you. It's about finding someone worth forgiving when they do. She didn't even do anything wrong. I just ran scared. "I know." Sarah finished her coffee and stood up. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" The afternoon brought 3 deliveries and enough chaos to temporarily quiet my overthinking brain. But driving back to the motel that evening, Sarah's words echoed in my head. I was pulling into the parking lot when I saw her. Evelyn sat on the concrete steps outside my room, looking impossibly beautiful even in jeans and a simple sweater. She'd been crying. I could tell from the slight puffiness around her eyes, but she stood up when I approached, shoulders squared like she was preparing for battle. "We need to talk." "How did you find me?" Sarah gave me the address. After I explained that I was worried you might do something stupid. Sarah had no right. "Sarah cares about you, like I do. like you won't let yourself believe. I unlocked the motel room door, and she followed me inside. The space looked even more depressing with her in it, all faded beige and fluorescent lighting compared to her natural radiance. "Nice place," she said without sarcasm. "It's temporary. So is this conversation, if you keep pushing me away." She sat on the edge of the bed, the only furniture besides a broken chair. I stayed standing, needing the distance. "I've been thinking about what you said. About not knowing if you can trust me. Evelyn, let me finish." Her voice was steady, but I caught the slight tremor underneath. "You're right. We haven't known each other long. And you have every reason to be careful after what Marcus did." Relief flooded through me. She understood. She was going to make this easy. "But here's what I know about you, Chelsea Garcia. You delivered my neighbor's baby last month, Mrs. Kim. She told me how you stayed 3 hours past your shift because she was scared and alone, how you held her hand through contractions and made sure she felt safe." I remembered Mrs. Kim. Tiny woman, first baby, husband deployed overseas. "I know you cry when you lose patience, even when you've done everything right. I know you carry granola bars for expectant fathers who forget to eat. I know you chose your profession because you believe in bringing life into the world safely. That doesn't mean..." "I'm not finished." She stood up, moving closer. "I know you take your coffee black because you're too impatient to add cream. I know you hum old country songs when you think no one's listening. I know you have a scar on your left shoulder from falling off your bike at age 7. Each observation hit like a gentle blow. When had I told her these things? When had she been paying such close attention? I know you're terrified of letting anyone matter, because you think caring about someone gives them permission to destroy you. And I know you're wrong. Am I? Look at my track record. Look at mine." She was close enough now that I could smell her lavender scent. My last relationship ended because she said I was too intense, too focused on healing and colors and alternative medicine. She wanted someone more conventional. "You never told me that." "Because it didn't matter. What matters is that I'm here, in this horrible motel room, fighting for something you're determined to throw away." "Why?" "Because I'm falling in love with you, you stubborn, beautiful disaster." The words hung between us like a bridge I'd been too scared to cross. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. "That's a terrible idea." "Probably." She reached up, cupping my face in her hands. "But I'd rather be stupid with you than safe without you." Before I could think of another reason to resist, she kissed me, soft and sure and tasting like hope. My defenses crumbled like tissue paper. "I'm scared," I whispered against her lips. "Me too. That's how you know it matters." She was right. Standing there in that terrible motel room with her hands in my hair and her heart beating against mine, I finally understood what Sarah had been trying to tell me. Love wasn't about guarantees. It was about choosing to trust someone with your heart, even knowing they could break it. "I'm sorry," I said. For what I said at the studio. For running away. "I'm sorry you felt like you had to." We held each other in the fluorescent gloom, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe properly. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we figure out how to fix this mess together." Together. The word felt foreign and terrifying, and absolutely right. Evelyn's idea of figuring it out together started with dragging me to 3 pawn shops the next morning. Armed with photos of my grandmother's medical instruments and a fierce determination that made me fall a little more in love with her, she marched into each store like a woman on a mission. "These items were stolen property," she announced to the third shop owner, a grizzled man who looked like he'd seen every sob story in Kansas City. "Lady, I got receipts. Guy brought them in fair and square. The guy didn't own them." I stepped forward, showing him the photos again. "This stethoscope belonged to my great-grandmother. See the inscription? Dr. Margaret Garcia, 1943. The man squinted at the photo, then at something behind his counter. "You got proof of ownership?" I pulled out the insurance papers I'd found in my mother's old jewelry box. Documentation going back 70 years, proving the medical collection's provenance. Well, shit. He scratched his beard. I paid good money for these pieces. How much? Evelyn asked. $1,200 for the lot. My heart sank. Even if we could buy them back, I didn't have $1,200 to spare. We'll take them, Evelyn said, pulling out her credit card. Evelyn, no. You can't. Yes, I can. She looked at me with those warm brown eyes that had become my anchor. These belong to your family. This is what people do for each other. The pawn shop owner wrapped my grandmother's instruments with surprising care, and I found myself crying right there at the counter. Not just from relief, but from the overwhelming realization that someone actually gave a damn about what mattered to me. Thank you, I whispered as we walked back to her car. Thank me by letting me help with the rest of this mess. The rest of the mess turned out to be complicated. Marcus had used my student loan money as collateral for other debts, creating a web of financial obligations that made my head spin. But Evelyn approached it like a puzzle, spreading papers across her kitchen table and making phone calls to credit counselors. You need a lawyer, she said after 2 hours of research. I can't afford a lawyer. My college roommate is a paralegal. She owes me about 50 favors. Watching Evelyn fight for me was like watching a force of nature. She made calls, organized documents, and somehow convinced Marcus to meet us at a coffee shop downtown to discuss repayment terms. He showed up looking like hell, unshaven and wearing the same clothes from 3 days ago. Chelsea, I'm glad you called. I've been thinking about solutions. Save it, I said, sliding a legal document across the table. This is your repayment plan. Evelyn's friend drew it up. Marcus scanned the papers, his face growing paler. $500 a month? I can't afford that. Then get a second job, sell your gaming equipment, figure it out. My voice was ice cold. Because if you default on this agreement, we're going to small claims court, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of roommate you are. That's harsh, even for you. Harsh? I leaned forward. You stole $15,000 from me and sold irreplaceable family heirlooms. This is me being generous. Evelyn's hand found mine under the table, her touch steadying my anger before it could spiral into something destructive. Sign the papers, Marcus, she said quietly, before Chelsea changes her mind about letting you off this easy. He signed. Reluctantly, with multiple complaints, but he signed. Outside the coffee shop, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. One crisis down, Evelyn said, linking our arms as we walked toward her car. Thank you for all of it. I don't know how to repay you. I can think of a few ways. She gave me that mischievous smile that made my stomach flutter. We barely made it through her apartment door before we were kissing. Months of tension and fear finally releasing into desperate need. She pressed me against the wall, her hands tangling in my hair, and I realized how much I'd missed her, even in just those few terrible days apart. I love you too, I whispered against her mouth. I should have said it at the motel. Say it now. I love you, Evelyn Stewart, even though you're crazy enough to date a disaster like me. She laughed, that wind chime sound I'd grown addicted to. Especially because I'm crazy enough. We made love with an urgency that spoke of nearly losing each other. Hands relearning familiar territory, whispers of reassurance and promise. Afterward, wrapped in sheets that smelled like her lavender shampoo, I felt something I'd forgotten existed. Security. Move in with me, she said suddenly. What? Your lease with Marcus is up next month anyway, right? Move in here. We'll convert the storage room into a study space for you. Evelyn, we just got back together. Maybe we should take things slow. How's that been working for you so far? She propped herself up on one elbow, studying my face. Besides, someone needs to make sure you eat actual meals and get more than 4 hours of sleep. I don't want you to feel like you have to take care of me. I want to take care of you. There's a difference. The distinction mattered. This wasn't pity or obligation. This was choice, freely given. Okay, I said, but I'm paying half the utilities. Deal? She sealed it with a kiss that tasted like new beginnings. The next few weeks blurred together in the best possible way, moving my few belongings into Evelyn's space above the studio, learning to navigate shared mornings and whose turn it was to do dishes, discovering that she sang in the shower and that I could make her laugh until she snorted by doing impressions of difficult patients. But the real test came on a snowy November evening when my phone rang during dinner. "Emergency at the hospital," I said, already reaching for my coat. "Twins coming early. Could be a long night." "Go." She kissed me quickly. "I'll keep dinner warm." "Don't wait up. These things can take forever." "I'll wait up anyway." I drove through the snow thinking about that promise. How many times had I come home to empty apartments and cold dinners? How many times had I wished for someone who understood that my work didn't follow a schedule? The delivery was complicated. 36 weeks, twin boys, 1 breech presentation. I spent 6 hours coaching their mother through contractions while monitoring 2 heartbeats and praying everything would go smoothly. At 4 a.m., I finally handed her 2 healthy babies and watched her husband cry with relief. "Thank you," she whispered, exhausted but glowing. "Thank you for bringing them home safe." Those words always got to me. The reminder that my job wasn't just medical care, it was delivering miracles. I drove home through empty streets, bone-tired but satisfied. The studio windows glowed warm yellow in the pre-dawn darkness, and I knew Evelyn had kept her promise. I found her asleep on the couch, still wearing her clothes from dinner, my plate covered with foil on the coffee table beside her. She'd waited. "Hey," I whispered, kissing her forehead. She stirred, blinking sleepily. "How did it go?" "Twin boys. Both healthy." "Good." She sat up, immediately alert. "Are you hungry? I kept your dinner." "I'm perfect." And for the first time in my adult life, I actually meant it. Living with Evelyn felt like learning to breathe underwater, impossible until suddenly it wasn't. 2 months of shared mornings, joint grocery shopping, and figuring out whose turn it was to clean the bathroom had settled into something that felt dangerously close to domestic bliss. Marcus had actually stuck to the repayment plan, transferring $500 every month with mechanical precision. My student loans were back on track. The medical instruments sat in a place of honor on our bedroom dresser, polished and gleaming. Our bedroom, I'd started thinking. Not hers, not mine, ours. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like coming home. "You're humming again," Evelyn noted over breakfast, looking up from the color therapy journal she was reading. "Am I?" "That old Patsy Cline song. You always hum when you're content." I considered this. When had she learned to read my moods so accurately? When had I become transparent enough for someone else to decipher? "Mrs. Henderson is due any day now," I said, changing the subject. "Twins again." "I'm starting to specialize in multiples. Maybe the universe is telling you something." "Like what?" "Like you're good at managing complicated situations that require extra patience." She was looking at me with that particular expression that meant she was thinking about more than just my work. We'd been having conversations around the edges of bigger topics lately, future plans, what we wanted long-term, whether this thing between us had staying power. "Speaking of complicated situations," I said, "Sarah asked if you wanted to come to the hospital Christmas party next week." "You want me to meet your work friends?" "I want you to meet everyone who matters to me." The distinction was important. I'd never brought anyone to a hospital function before. Too personal, too much like making a statement about permanence. "I'd love to." My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Mrs. Henderson, active labor, asking for me specifically. "Duty calls," I said, grabbing my coat. "Bundle up, it's supposed to snow again." She kissed me goodbye at the door, and I found myself pausing, memorizing the moment. Her hair still messy from sleep, wearing my old medical school sweatshirt, tasting like coffee and mint toothpaste. "What?" she asked, catching me staring. "Nothing, just... I love you." "I love you too. Now go deliver some babies." The drive to the hospital took twice as long through swirling snow that was already accumulating on the roads. By the time I reached the maternity ward, the storm had escalated from light flurries to potential blizzard. Mrs. Henderson was exactly where I'd left her 3 days ago during her false alarm, determined, exhausted, and ready to meet her twins. "Chelsea, thank goodness," she panted between contractions. "These babies picked quite a night to make their entrance." "They always do," I said, checking her progress. "Looks like we're having twins tonight." The next 8 hours blurred together in the familiar rhythm of labor and delivery. Mrs. Henderson was a champion, pushing through back-to-back contractions while her husband held her hand and whispered encouragement. The twins were cooperative, no breech presentations or tangled cords, just 2 healthy babies ready to join the world. At 2 a.m., I placed a daughter in each of their parents' arms and watched the magic happen. That moment when strangers became a family, when love multiplied instead of divided. "Thank you," Mrs. Henderson whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me be part of this." Outside, the blizzard had reached full fury. The hospital parking lot was buried under 6 inches of snow, with more falling steadily. My car was completely covered, and the roads looked impassable. "You're not driving in this," Sarah said, finding me scraping ice off my windshield. "Stay in the on-call room tonight. Evelyn's expecting me home. Evelyn would rather have you alive than stuck in a ditch somewhere." She had a point. I texted Evelyn about the storm, expecting understanding but hoping for disappointment that I wouldn't be home. Her response was immediate. "Stay safe. I'll keep the bed warm." The on-call room was standard hospital accommodations. Narrow bed, fluorescent lighting, the distant hum of medical equipment. I'd slept in dozens of identical rooms during my training, but tonight felt different. Tonight I had someone waiting for me at home. Someone who would worry if I didn't make it back safely. The storm finally broke around dawn, leaving Kansas City buried under 8 inches of pristine snow. The drive home took an hour through streets that hadn't seen a plow truck yet, but I barely noticed the inconvenience. All I could think about was getting back to Evelyn, to our apartment, to the life we'd built together. I found her in the studio, leading an early morning session with an elderly client. She looked up when I entered, and her smile could have melted all the snow in Missouri. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Chelsea, my partner." Partner, not girlfriend, not roommate, partner. The word hit me like electricity. When had we crossed that line? When had we stopped being 2 people who happened to be dating and become a unit? "Chelsea's the midwife who delivered my granddaughter," Mrs. Patterson said warmly. "Sarah Marie, born last month. I remember. 8 pounds, 2 ounces, and absolutely perfect." We chatted for a few minutes about the baby, about the storm, about how grateful Mrs. Patterson was for both our services. When she left, I found myself alone with Evelyn in the rainbow-lit space where we'd first kissed. "Partner?" I asked. Too presumptuous? No, just, when did that happen? When you started humming Patsy Cline songs and worrying about whether I'd eaten lunch. When you let me help with the Marcus situation. When you moved in here and made it feel like home instead of just where I sleep. She was right. Somewhere between the first color therapy session and last night's blizzard, we'd become something bigger than the sum of our individual parts. "I like the sound of it," I said. "Good. Because I'm thinking of expanding the business, adding a wellness component for healthcare workers, stress management, burnout prevention, that sort of thing." "That's brilliant. I was hoping you'd help me develop the program. You understand the medical field better than anyone." The offer was tempting, but something about it made me pause. "You don't need to create work for me, Evelyn. I'm not going anywhere. This isn't about keeping you around. This is about building something together. Together." That word again, but now it felt less terrifying and more like possibility. "Okay," I said. "Let's build something together." She kissed me then, soft and sure and tasting like the future. Outside, Kansas City sparkled under fresh snow, and I realized that somewhere between delivering Mrs. Henderson's twins and scraping ice off my windshield, I'd stopped running from the best thing that had ever happened to me. "By the way," Evelyn murmured against my lips, "I have an idea for the Christmas party." "Oh? How do you feel about matching outfits?" I groaned, but I was smiling. You're going to be trouble, aren't you? Count on it. And for the first time in my life, trouble sounded like exactly what I wanted. Spring came early to Kansas City that year, painting the plaza in soft greens and cherry blossoms. Evelyn and I had survived our first winter together, which included 3 blizzards, 2 holiday parties where she charmed everyone at the hospital, and one spectacular fight about whose turn it was to buy groceries that ended with us making love on the kitchen floor. The wellness program for healthcare workers had taken off beyond our wildest expectations. Doctors, nurses, and paramedics packed into evening sessions, desperate for stress relief and healing. Evelyn had expanded to 3 nights a week, and I'd started assisting with the sessions designed specifically for birth professionals. "You're a natural teacher," she told me after watching me lead a group through breathing exercises. "Ever think about expanding beyond direct patient care?" I considered this while organizing the colored lights we used for group therapy. 6 months ago, the suggestion would have felt like abandonment of my calling. Now it felt like evolution. Maybe. After I finished paying off those student loans, about that. Evelyn pulled an envelope from her desk drawer. "This came for you today." The return address made my heart stop. Kansas City School of Medicine, Financial Aid Office. I tore it open with shaking hands, expecting another bill or payment reminder. Instead, I found a letter that made me read it 3 times before the words sank in. "They're offering me a teaching position," I said slowly. "Part-time instructor for the midwifery program, salary plus benefits." "That's amazing. What would you teach?" "Practical delivery techniques. Crisis management. Patient advocacy." I looked up at her, still processing. It would mean fewer overnight shifts, more regular hours, which means more time together. More time for everything. The wellness program, this. I gestured between us. Building whatever we're building here. She crossed the room and pulled me into her arms. "What are we building, Chelsea?" It was a question we'd been dancing around for months. The answer felt obvious and terrifying and absolutely right. "A life," I said simply. "We're building a life together." She kissed me then, and I tasted salt on her lips. Happy tears, I realized. We were both crying and laughing and holding each other in the middle of her rainbow studio like we'd just discovered fire. "I have something for you," she said, when we finally separated. "Evelyn, you don't need to—" "Hush." She disappeared into the back room and returned carrying something wrapped in soft blue fabric. I unwrapped it carefully, revealing a vintage medical bag identical to the one Marcus had sold. Same leather, same brass fixtures, same sense of history and purpose. "Where did you find this?" "Estate sale in Lawrence. The woman who owned it was a country doctor, delivered babies for 40 years. Her family said she would have wanted it to go to someone who understood its significance." I ran my fingers over the worn leather, thinking about the women who'd carried similar bags. My great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother. Now me. "There's something else." She reached into the bag and pulled out a small velvet box that made my knees go weak. "Evelyn. Before you panic, this isn't a proposal." "Not exactly." She opened the box, revealing 2 simple silver bands. "I had these made. Promise rings. A promise that we're in this together, whatever comes next." I stared at the rings, my throat tight with emotion. Whatever comes next. Teaching positions and wellness programs, and maybe someday a house with a real garden instead of potted plants on a fire escape. Maybe expanding the business, maybe traveling, maybe just growing old together in this studio surrounded by rainbows. She was offering me everything I'd never known I wanted. Stability without stagnation, partnership without possession, a future that stretched beyond the next delivery, the next crisis, the next reason to run. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. "About me? I'm still a disaster most days." "You're my disaster, and I'm yours." She slipped one ring onto my finger, and I did the same for her. The silver felt warm against my skin, like a promise and a benediction. "I love you," I said, the words carrying more weight than they ever had before. I love you too. We stood there in the late afternoon light, wearing matching rings and ridiculous grins, surrounded by the tools of our respective trades. Her color wheels and healing crystals, my medical bag and stethoscope. Different approaches to the same goal, helping people heal. So what happens now? I asked. Now we paint. Paint? She gestured toward the blank wall behind her desk. I've been saving this space for something special. A mural. Something that represents both of us. I looked at the wall, then at the woman who'd somehow convinced me that love wasn't a luxury I couldn't afford, but a necessity I'd been denying myself. What did you have in mind? A rainbow. But not just any rainbow. One that starts with the deep blues of birth, new life, new beginnings, moving through greens for healing and growth. Then the warm yellows and oranges of joy and vitality, ending in violet for wisdom and spiritual connection. The full spectrum. The full spectrum of us. We spent the rest of the afternoon mixing paints and sketching designs, our voices blending with the sounds of Kansas City awakening to spring. Tomorrow I would call the medical school and accept the teaching position. Tomorrow we would start planning the expansion of the wellness program. Tomorrow we would take the next step in building whatever this beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect thing between us was becoming. But today, we painted rainbows on white walls and talked about the future like people who finally believed they deserved one. You know, I said, adding a streak of brilliant orange to our emerging mural, I never thought I'd be the type for matching rings and joint business ventures. You're not the type for anything, Evelyn replied, her brush creating perfect arcs of purple and blue. That's what I love about you. She was right. I wasn't the type for domestic bliss or long-term planning or trusting someone else with my heart. But here I was, covered in paint and wearing a promise ring, planning a future with a woman who saw colors where I saw only black and white. As the sun set through the studio windows, casting our rainbow mural in golden light, I realized this was what happiness looked like. Not the dramatic highs and lows I'd mistaken for passion, but this quiet certainty that tomorrow would be better because we'd face it together. Perfect, Evelyn said, stepping back to admire our work. I looked at the mural, at her paint-streaked face, at the ring catching light on my finger, and had to agree. It was absolutely perfect.